used to constantly tell, especially people I mentor or I'm talking to early talent, which I do often here now at PGIM, right? I often use the refrain, don't network, connect. Catalysts finds ways to create value in the world of network.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations. Today, we are incredibly excited to have time with Manoj Govindan, who is a venture builder who employs the broad technology ecosystem of investors, universities, entrepreneurs, tech giants to discover, experiment, validate, and adopt emerging technologies to solve for specific business opportunities, driving growth of the business versus the running of the business. He's currently supporting PGIM, the global asset management business of Prudential Financial Inc. It is such a joy to have you with us today, Manoj.
Such a delight joining you both. I know we've been chomping at the bit to try and get to this point. I know we've had all kinds of informal conversations, so this is quite exciting.
For us too. And I'd love to invite you to start with, I just read a couple sentences. Can you share with us your catalytic journey, the highlights across your life and your work that you're most proud of to help us see your catalytic nature?
Sure. I 30-year career. I'll give you a little bit of history that led up to that 30 years, which will also inform you how initially it was very haphazard. I think the elements or the attributes of what we now refer to as the catalyst haphazardly kind of burst into my life, right? Or burst out of me into our lives, if you will, however you want to look at it. And so I grew up in India. And my dad, and we'll get to this, but my dad, he's my hero, and he's also somebody who really gave me the structure and all of the attributes I needed to build myself and be my best self out there, right? So we'll get to him in a few, but we were growing up in India, right? So guess what? Parents, the extended family, all wanted me to either be a doctor or engineer. So the only two choices you have in a career, especially 30 years or 35 years ago, right? So I personally wanted to actually get into bureaucracy, the politics, not the politicians, but the people who build and execute policy behind the government, right? So the experts in specific areas and policy and stuff like that. That's what I wanted to become. So I actually, on my own, when I thought I could, I joined a school for Bachelor of Arts and political science, this, that, and the other. And my parents wouldn't have it. And so guess what? I was asked to be an engineer. I was given a choice, engineer or doctor, has to be an engineer. And I chose engineering, don't ask me why, and computer science and what have you. They paid for everything. That right there, right? So I kind of literally muttered my way through all of the 4 years of college. I was not a very good student. I'll be perfectly honest with you on this. I struggled because I didn't fit in, right? That said, after I graduated, my first job was anything but computer science. I was selling English music cassettes in India. So I used to go to distributors and say, this was just me protesting, right? In some ways. So I'm just kind of telling you the elements of a catalyst kind of showing up in unexpected ways. So I sold cassettes, English cassettes in India, to distributor sales folks. What that taught me was, that here's my game. Here's what I'm starting to develop my skill sets that came naturally to me, right? So elements of why it matters that you need to have a network. What does it mean for you to leverage the network, not just to execute a transaction, but to build relationships, to pay things forward, all the different things that go into the sales cycle that people don't talk about, because sales cycles are become so commoditized these days, right? I mean, so we don't go in there. But I learned all of this in my first job, if you will, right? That was my choice, not because my parents wanted me to be there. So that was that. And then again, this is what serendipity and all these things kind of purpose comes to play. I was headhunted. This is before I went and sold the cassettes. Ford Motor Company had come to our campus in college, computer science college, and they had interviewed, and then subsequently I learned that I was pre-selected to be a database computer science engineer in the US for my first job, official first job, if you will, right? And guess what? So I ended up in the US. Now, why did that matter that it came full circle? Turns out I was also gay, but I was not out in India. I couldn't be out in India. It was illegal. It was a crime. Even my parents didn't know. Nothing happened, right? But because I came to the US, and I came to the US because of my computer science degree, not because I wanted to. I had no plans to do so. I was able to come and be my full self. Day one, my job at Ford Motor Company, right? So just to give you a more sense of how the world shapes around you and makes things happen in spite or regardless of how bitter you were about the choices that were made for you, right? So it's very interesting elements that kind of got contributed to this. So anyway, fast forward, the first 3 years of my career, I spent as an engineer, studiously trying to find my place, right? Without building an imposter syndrome. And truly, I just didn't enjoy it at all. And so what I very quickly learned was I'm much better off understanding and listening and learning the business and being much closer to the business. So I became a business analyst. So I was using some of my computer science skills for analysis and all that stuff, but for the most part, I was a business analyst. Then I became a consultant. So for the next 10 years of my career, I was a consultant. That consultancy, again, attributes of the catalyst really kind of seeped in to allow me to really hone in on a specific kind of consulting, which were mergers and acquisitions. And again, without saying it now, I mean, looking back, I can see elements of the catalyst kind of forming here, because mergers and acquisitions are exactly that, right? Two entities who have never been together are suddenly together, and you have to find a way to make that work. And there are many, many reasons for M&As to happen, and so you have to kind of dive into the culture behind that, understand how to break that down, how to translate that back into the outcomes you want, and so there's a lot of catalytic elements that kind of get seeped in there. And then after the 10 years, I dropped my consulting gig and joined Bank of America as an employee. And this was at the behest of my mentor, who serendipitously I think, thought through what was going to happen the next few years, which was the financial services world was going upside down. This was 2007, 2008, right? So think about it. I mean, literally everything, Lehman Brothers, the whole thing, everything was coming crashing down. So he said, join Bank of America as an employee, and we'll find what you need to be, your purpose of what you need to be doing at this company, right? Dan Choi is his name. And he was a catalyst, almost certainly was a catalyst, looking back again. I don't think he called himself that, but he's definitely a catalyst. So when I joined there, I spent about 8 years there eventually. And I ended up building my job or creating my job from scratch. And this is the job I do today. It just happens to be in different companies, in different environments, different challenges, what have you. And I would say I honed my catalyst skills, attributes, and really leveraged and exploited it at Bank of America first. And many of the examples, historic or empirical examples, I reference every day when I talk about being a catalyst, or think about being a catalyst, or reflect upon being a catalyst, goes back to my kind of Bank of America days, right? And even today, even in my day job at PGIM, often when I'm talking to a vendor, or I'm talking to a student, or I'm talking to an early talent, or to my colleague, or to a business partner, I'm constantly referencing those examples that basically says, here's why we want to think about it this way. And here's an example of what happened that might help you kind of break out of your challenge in a different way, and so on and so forth, right? So I spent 8 years there. And one of the things I borrowed from my consulting gig really informed me on this job. And this again goes back to these attributes of being a consultant. And that is these large companies that were merging. One of the things I noticed about them is they were spending inordinate amounts of money buying technology. And so this is the connecting the dots component of the core component of the catalyst. They were spending billions of dollars. Bank of America's technology budget was the billions of dollars, is all I have to say, per year, right? Checks to vendors. But if you go to the C-suite and you ask them, what are you getting for this money that you're spending? If you need to make a pivot for your business, you are still spending, on top of this, another $20 million, another 18 months for that change to happen. Why, right? Why is that? Why do you not have a sustainable well of resources, money, talent, ideas, all of that, right? To be able to drive the pivot and change on a dime, because you're spending all this money, and what you're not doing is you're not building that ecosystem the right way, right? So how can I help you build that ecosystem the right way so that you can leverage the spend you have in the right way to adopt new technologies? And you bring that fact forward to PGIM, and that is literally what I repeated across all of these entities. So I worked at Bank of America for 8, Wells Fargo for 4, Delta for a year and a half, CN and Turner for a year, Wellstar Health, Novant Health, and then Prudential PGIM, right? So I've been here 4 years, and that is what I'm doing. Now, of course, experience and time and evolution of both technology and corporate environments have kind of shape-shifted the mission a little differently, but the job is still the same. How do I use the ecosystem to help PGIM discover, explore, and adopt new technologies to solve specific business problems within PGIM? That's kind of the mission and goal of the innovation team here, right? So which is what we're trying to drive here. So I'll stop there. I know I kind of scanned through a full spectrum there of the catalytic journey, but here we are.
And I love it. I so appreciate it, because it's why we ask people to do this, because you can look at someone's LinkedIn or resume and you'll have questions, right? As catalysts, we often jump, at least it looks like it to others' eyes. You've done such a beautiful job of helping us see the intense learning that happened at every place. And it's not just skills that you built, but it was an awareness of who you are and what your natural talents were that you were honing, and then bringing into this next place that allowed you to bring more and more value. So thank you. I really appreciate the time and attention. It was incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think I put it all in one place like that until now, right?
Heard
So
here first.
I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, it's a joy to get to discover with you.
Yeah.
Laced across your story, I hear your catalytic awakening happen. And so I would love to hear, how do you relate to the concept of catalyst? How do you define that today?
Yeah, so again, it has been an evolution and an awakening, if you will. And I might have called it different things at different times. but I'll give you an example, and then I'll kind of come back to your answer, right? So there was not long ago, I used to constantly tell, especially people I mentor or I'm talking to early talent, which I do often here now at PGIM, right? I often use the refrain, don't network, connect. And it's something that keeps coming back to me. And the reason I say that is, especially in schools in the US in particular, career counselors appear to beat down these students about this word networking. And they come out into the world with this absolute pent-up thing for networking. And it's, in my view, counterproductive in many instances, because it's not really getting them what they need. And it's in turn putting off probably a lot of people around them, right? Because it comes across as selfish, self-serving, which is the last thing you want in your first moment out in the world after school. So I'd say you need to connect. And what is the difference? Difference is you need to pursue creating mutual value. So this is where my head was as a I didn't know it. I was a catalyst at the time, but that's where, but that was a definition of a catalyst that I said is catalysts finds ways to create value in the world of network, in the world of networking or using networks, right? So that was a definition. I think that has evolved, especially with the CLT, right? With Samudra and with the conversations we have had, and even just the genesis of how you all came to create this trust set of trusts that you have, not just the CLT, but the others as well, right? All have informed me as that there's more to this than just creating value. One of the things that strikes me every time I connect with the Catalyst Trust is Leadership Trust is how you are having a broad reach into different people and where they are in their lives and trying to help them take that to the next level. Right? Their lives, individualized next chapter. You're doing it at a broad level, but at the same time, you are passionately personal in how you are helping each of those individuals get to that next level. And it looks a little different for each of us. And that ability to scale personalization, I think, is an important lesson for me in terms of evolving my concept of a catalyst, right? Whatever I was calling it a few years ago. So that would inform my definition of a catalyst today, Tracy, is that ability to scale personal development. Maybe that's a good way to put it. At that level, right? I mean, we're not talking about personal development for hundreds of people. We're talking about personal development for a special group of people who have special kinds of talent and how they can maximize what they do and what outcomes come out of what they do for themselves and for the community around them, right? So that would be that.
For me, it's so fascinating, like what I understand, and this is how I think about you, Manoj, is like the leveraging the connections that you were talking about and how that's part of, not all catalysts show up that way, but certainly the dot connecting is foundational to us. But you take that dot connecting into the personal, and when you're saying connect, don't network, or bust the silos, or create the ecosystem, like that sounds like one of your superpowers. And we've gotten to witness and love meeting all of your people too. I'd love to go back though. And I'm wondering, when you think about one or two of your biggest challenges as a Catalyst executive, what are they? And I guess a fast follow on is, how might something like the Catalyst Leadership Trust help you with those challenges?
Three things come to mind, right? First one is hubris or risk or both, or risk averseness specifically, right? Right. So hubris because the company is doing really well. And again, I'm not saying that PGIM has hubris. I'm just saying in my 30-year career, I've kind of watched these companies that and the moment in how they were growing or how they were changing, and hubris was often a big challenge. And this is the confidence that the leadership of a business or a company has, that they are the right company in the right place at the right time, and they can do no wrong, or nothing.
Has that changed since the pandemic? Do you find companies being a little bit less?
Yeah, a lot actually, right?
Yeah.
A lot, very circumspect. Also, I have noticed, and this probably also happened in the meltdown in 2008, same thing, right? There was a little, maybe not bad. And then, of course, then we went back to our ways a little bit in some cases. But yes, but there has been a very discernible, circumspect view of things because of the pandemic in many cases. Of course, there are public examples of people who've gone the other way, right? And done everything possibly wrong that they could do, exploiting, price gouging. I mean, I can go on and on about these things, but but yes, in general, I would say companies, but so hubris is often a challenge, but risk averseness is also just as big a challenge sometimes to kind of, and that is probably more so because hubris is easy to recognize, right? And perhaps easy to call out if you have the political capital to do so, right? And be able to kind of deal with that. And it's in some cases, some people would say it's a good problem to have. Risk averseness is a little bit more, in my view, insidious challenge because it can get mixed up with political agendas, right? And one of the books I keep referring to, Shannon, I know you've heard this many, many times, orbiting the giant hairball, right? This companies, when they become big, we become giant hairballs. And so risk averseness on its own is not a bad thing. Companies, when they become big, they have lots of responsibilities. And so we have to be mindful and methodical, as PGIM would be, right? Of how we move forward. But when it gets in the innovation space, in the space of change, it can get mixed up with political agendas. And this is where silos come into play, right? So suddenly small groups of people who have their own agendas take on the risk averseness mantle to become the antibodies of change. And that becomes insidious and harder to discern, harder to push back on. Harder.
Well, it is because, I mean, it's sort of like people are like, well, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM or McKinsey. Very few people get fired for like holding a risk line, right? And being like, but it is different when you're the one that's sticking your neck out, advocating for the change.
Correct. And this is where the catalyst can come into play, right? Because the biggest ability for the catalyst is to have that peer knowledge. So one of the things Robin, our Chief Innovation Officer, she talks about this a lot, right? Let's constantly see what our peers are thinking. And they usually have the same struggles or the same challenges or the same opportunities that they are pursuing or similar opportunities that they're pursuing. So we should be brave and courageous enough to be able to step in with our peers and share and collaborate where possible, right? And she's a big proponent of that. In fact, she has a whole program focused on our peers that we do throughout the year. That's
and so these are internal peers, Manoj?
No, these are
external. Okay,
peers,
great.
both in the industry, but she also goes outside our industry. So absolutely, yeah. So we have, this is not public information, but this is we conduct our internal events, innovation events, and we constantly are bringing in these peer concepts. Another way we do that is also we externalize. So we go out, to speak at certain events or at our peers in some cases, right? And so those are all opportunities for us to mind share. It's not about us just telling them what we're doing. It's also us kind of commiserating with them, if you will, of the challenges. Right. Anyway, so I know I stuck on hubris and risk, but that's the first one. the mix of talent, this is unique to catalysts and perhaps innovation, right? Which is mix of talent, right? So talent is obviously a big challenge for anybody at any given point in time. So a huge focus for companies in terms of identifying talent, retaining talent, all that stuff. But within innovation and for catalysts, for it to really work, we need the right mix of people. So we talk about diversity, and PGIM is huge on diversity, especially diversity of thought, right? And so this is something that in the past, in the companies, now we have come, I think, full circle in terms of diversity of thought, right, and diversity of action, and so someone like PGIM appreciates that, and our CEO talks about this publicly, even, right, which is our people are our competitive advantage, right? Our talent is, and so the mix of talent is what I mean, right? So with it's not enough that we have some just rock star idea people. It's not enough that we have rock star engineers. It's not enough that we have people who are very operational and can drive things to execution. It's not enough that we have people who are risk focused and understand the risks and we need a mix of them, and we need the right mix and have all of them have the same energy and access and visibility in the project or initiative or change or innovation that makes it most effective. So that's a big challenge that kind of weighs on a catalyst's mind typically, right? And then the third one, and this goes back to that connection thing we talked about, mutual value creation. So this is something, our team spends a lot of time on in the partnership space, right? Specifically around partnerships. When we're reaching out to a VC or a university or an individual talent coming in or a contract coming in, constantly trying to figure out how to create mutual value. Because the incentive structure for creating mutual value is wholly ethical, right? There is no hidden agenda when it is clear the value that will be created on both sides. And so that's a challenge, but it's an opportunity to kind of really work through that. And so that's something that we spend a lot of time on here at PGIM as well.
I love the list so much. We don't have time to go through all of them, so I would love to talk about how you navigate the either and or the hubris and the risk challenge, because that's so universal, and especially the risk piece. I think as the speed of change is accelerating, there's still the antibodies in the organizations that you were talking about.
Absolutely. And so it is, by the way, the solution to that, how I've learned how to navigate that, and we are collectively trying to do that here now, is finding orbit around the hairball, right? So this has some tentacles to creating value, but it's all about finding orbit. So I'll give you an example of how this goes. And then there's a very generic example so that, I'm not, taking names or, giving out any specific project out. We have an exciting technology that we really want to test and bring into the company and learn from it and maybe adopt it to solve one of our problems. Problem is, it is a very young company that doesn't have history, right? So guess what? Our risk flags are all the way up, right? So we are fully cognizant that this is a major risk. We have sensitive documents. We are in the regulated environment, so there's not a lot of room there for us to kind of play with this. And so how do we navigate this, right? So over the years, I've learned that these companies, PGIM included, have built strategic partnerships with certain companies that have built-in risk mitigation frameworks. Find a way to open the loop between those partners and the partner you want.
Fascinating.
How do you create incentives for a large vendor or partner technology company like Microsoft or IBM or whatever, and one of these young startups basically saying, we want to try this technology, but it's too risky for us to do it on our own. What role can you play? And in process, what value can you create for yourself, right?
I love how it always comes back, Manoj. It's like the mutual value creation, the connections, the ecosystem, the network. It's like if you're thinking at a systems level like you're like, here's the dials that I have to turn to overcome some of the biggest challenges to create change. And you're creating this movement, bringing people along.
And
Absolutely.
on that, you'd mentioned that the Catalyst Leadership Trust, which we love having you as a member, you add so much value. Speaking of value, you mentioned that it has helped you with some of the challenges. And so I'd love to circle back to that. Like, what role does a community like the Catalyst Leadership Trust play for you as an executive?
Yeah, so the peer knowledge or the peer insight is the most obvious one, right? So definitely that. The other thing also is just kind of validating some of the tools we use, right? So we all have different tools and we use them differently. And sometimes they work in the environments they're in, sometimes they don't work. And so the second thing that someone like me gets from the CLT is what are the other tools, right? One example that really popped up to me was this whole behavioral science of how Disney and does its solves its innovation challenges. Just the behavioral approach to it, right? I'm going to the core. It's not trying to address the symptoms, right? It's like a real authentic doctor. They're going after the core of what the problem is. It is behavior, right? How do humans respond to the challenge? How do different humans respond differently to the challenge? And how do we so that was a big learning moment. Just to give you a sense, it was a great tool, right? Using behavioral science to solve problems. It was fantastic. So, by the way, I almost immediately applied. We've applied it here, right? So PGIM is, we are big into the behavioral science. One of the partnerships I'm designing is with a university focused on behavioral science and understanding how behavioral science can influence product development. Right, our products. This is financial services products. Yeah.
So fun. And I love the landing on, ooh, that was my elbow. I love the landing on the action piece because that's so important for Catalyst. Like not just sitting around and waxing philosophical, although we love to do that too, but like, how do we bring this back into our orgs and change things? All right, I get the final fun question. Who's your favorite famous Catalyst, past or present, and why?
So he's still alive, so I don't know if he's past or present. My father, and I'll give a quick story as to why, right? And then leave you with the 3 points that still stick with me, all these years later, right? So my dad is only educated to 10th grade. Because his family couldn't afford it. So he had to go out, leave his education and find a job to sustain him and the family. And so he
You must be so proud of you, Manoj.
I appreciate that. Yes. He considered me and my brother, paying for our education, all of that stuff, right, growing up, as true investment to society, right? Which basically saying, I am giving these two individuals to societies in deliberate ways, all that stuff, right? So he's essentially, that's how he thinks about it. And he's actually wonderful human being. So he got his first job because he's a natural catalyst. Absolutely got his first job because of his network. He has no education, but he started his job and he worked for exactly one company his whole career. He started as the lowest level, a junior divisional clerk of this multinational company, and he retired 47 years later as the head of one of the divisions of the company, agrochemical division, right? Along the way, he became a marketing genius. He got the first Lee Iacocca Award for Marketing Excellence in India. It was instituted in India, and then he was the first person who got that. So these are all the reasons, right? I mean, there are tangible and intangible reasons that he was my catalyst is my catalyst in inspiration, if you will. Three things that he kind of has left with me that are foundational in how I want to use my catalyst journey going forward, right? With PGIM and with the community here. Because, I think I told you this, I came to the US because, of my dad's actions, and I came out here at BRG. So in addition to my role at PGIM, in the innovation world, I also happen to be the co-lead for the Pride Business Resource Group or Employee Resource Group, and very specific things that I'm trying to push there based on these three foundations, right? Those three are fundamentally drilling the ethics of change into every project you put in there. In the sense, it's not about checking the box. Is this compliant? Ethics or otherwise, right? That's what you typically do. Is if you have to be compliant, you have 9 boxes to check, and you check boxes. Well, not right. Go further than that, right? Basically saying it's not about just checking the boxes around these change. When you're trying to transform something, the ethics of it has to be absolutely unimmutable. Or immutable. What is it? I'm confused. Anyway, you know what I mean, right? So it cannot be challenged, right? The ethics should be kind of correct. That's number one, right? So as a catalyst, you are constantly pushing the world around you to change. So the ethics behind it has to be absolutely rock solid, right? Not checkbox. So that's one. Sustainable methods cannot be, yes, there are situational things that you have to do, but things have to sustain. Then people have to be able to go back to that method and be able to rely on that method over and over and over again. And so it's very sustainable methods, right? So, and then having a rather, people talk about balancing work and life, and around me, people have talked about it since I grew up. But my dad had a very different outlook to it. So he constantly says, the personal life and professional life have to be able to talk to each other.
Mm.
So if they don't speak the same language, you're going to be lost in one or the other.
Yeah.
Figure out how you want to do that, right? So it's an interesting top line, but I'll leave you with that, because there's more there, right? I mean, if we can have a whole nother hour conversation on what that means, right? For your personal life and your professional life to have conversation with each other. But he did that, right? So I remember people from the outside, my cousins and all these say, your dad's always traveling, he's such a workaholic. And so all these terms have kind of come to be. But I reflect on 40, 50 years, 30, 40, 50 years from that, and I'm telling you, that's what he mastered. He mastered the ability for his work life and his personal life to talk to each other. Because he's immensely happy. He's healthy. He's got 2 sons. He has invested out into the world, and we are doing our thing, right?
And it sounds like he was wildly successful in his own path. So like if that's the advice that he's living, then it's like, yes, let's use that as a model. And I also just really like the actual literalness of having the language in both places, because if you're not at a place that can talk about mental health and well-being and the prioritization and empowerment and all of those things, like you're right, you almost become like having to almost be a different person in both things. Manoj, thank you so much. You're right. We need to do more conversations. I already told people this is a cliffhanger because he's done this amazing thing internally that we want to share because he's just so brilliant and we want to share more info with the Catalyst community. But this was a lovely start to our conversations. And I'm just so grateful for this time with you and to have you in our world, in our Catalyst network. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
And I loved hearing your story. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably and authentically.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me. Nice to see you again, Tracy. Hopefully run into each other soon.
Oh, definitely.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world like Manoj's, please be sure to check out our book at Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, or go to our website at catalystconstellations.com.
And if you enjoyed this episode the way Shannon and I clearly have, please take a few seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And to all those other catalysts in your life, because we know you have them, please hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.